first AC/DC record we heard was For Those About to Rock. Yeah, and I think it was on a cassette that you got from our neighbor.
Yeah.
On a little slimline tape recorder, and it was a cassette of For Those About to Rock. And I think that's the first rock music besides Little Richard and Chuck Berry that our dad used to play that we heard at all, pretty much.
Yeah, he played me Motorhead and AC/DC, and I liked both. But he only had like a tape of Motorhead, as I can recall. But he had the full record with For Those About Rocks, and it was new at the time. Kind of, I mean, maybe
it's like 82.
Yeah, maybe it was about a year old or something, like 83. I think this would have been, and I think that maybe it's released like 82 or something.
Yeah, and you were like 4 years old or something? 5?
I was probably 6. So if it was 83, I was 6. And like, this is the best hard rock band in the world, and I believed him. And
we still believe him.
Yeah, we still believe him.
It's still true.
Yeah.
And
then listen to that thing, over and over and over and over, like it was the only music that existed for, I don't know, for quite a long time.
And even then, I think we tried to form a band. There was like a tape of us in the basement. I think Nick is on drums, I'm singing, and that neighbor is doing some kind of way. It sounds more like what he's doing on the guitar sounds more like Sonic Youth than AC/DC, but I guess it was like the energy was there.
Yeah, Pelle singing and I'm playing drums, and it's more, like it's jungle drums.
It's very free form.
Yeah.
It felt like AC/DC, but it didn't sound like AC/DC.
Yeah, but it's weird because with AC/DC, like when you discover a band like that when you're 6 years old, and I mean, you could only see, I mean, there's not a whole bunch of info on the For Those About Rock record. Like it's a Canon and it's sort of golden, but you totally know that this looks like rock and roll to me. And
yeah, it's got cannons.
And I remember like that because they were doing a show at the big football stadium in Stockholm. That there was the national stadium at that time for football, and they played there in maybe 84, 85 or something. And I really wanted to go, but I guess they thought it was too small, or I didn't really know how to make that work or something. But I remember
probably illegal at the time.
Our great grandma, she lived near that stadium, so she would hear it. And to me, that was, almost close enough. And then I remember my dad came and he showed me a picture of what it looked like, that show. And Angus, it was a big deal in the papers, I guess, with Angus doing that stripping bit and showing his butt or whatever. And I thought, so in my head, I could see what that show looked like. Like I knew that this is what the record cover looks like. This is what the picture in the paper looks like, and with the music. And I heard that my great grandma thought it was noise during the evening, and with those parts I could put it together in my head.
This is the coolest thing of all time. I'm sure she heard the cannons.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it is also like the most perfectly formed rock music that I think I've ever heard. It's the most like purity of vision, like. They figured out exactly how to make it sound perfect in an AC/DC way, and they know how to do it. And I think also, relate to the fact that they know how high the bar is. Like it'll take them 7 years to make a record, but every time one comes out, it's really great.
Probably everything. I mean, from being such a young age, knowing what they kind of looked like, and it was because we used to read about them as well, like read about AC/DC, read about Judas Priest, read about, Iron Maiden and stuff, like all, performing bands, if you will. Because our dad, he would subscribe to Guitar Player magazine, and they would always be, the big guitar players, they would always be in that magazine. So, you'd see pictures and you read about them and you listen to music, and it would, so, I mean, you knew what it was going to look like when you started when you were 6. Like if you scream, that's rock and roll. Like if you don't scream, chances are maybe it's not rock and roll.
I don't know specifically, like I think that the energy and just knowing how good it can be was an inspiration to us. Like how, like you see some of those like older live things like that, live from Paris, 78 or whatever it is. Like you can just see how good rock and roll can be. I think that was like the guiding light, but I don't think any specifics were really taken. I don't know, maybe some of Angus's moves maybe, but it wasn't really about that. But I think just like the pure vision and knowing that if your band has a thing, you should use that thing because no other band has that thing. I think we took that from them. Like, well, you know, they're AC/DC and we are the Hives, you know, like we're as lucky as we can get. We can be the Hives and do that the best we can, you know. We don't have to play, you know, like incorporate like reggae and stuff into it. It can just be the Hives and be the Hives as best as it can. The first time we got to see them was in Finland. We had played a show with the Helicopters. We were on tour with them. This was in 2000. And AC/DC was playing the same night. And the promoter was the same as our show. So they got us tickets. So I think we went before our show, right? And saw like half of the AC/DC show in an arena in Finland.
And then ran back, did our show.
Ran back and did our show. That was the first time. And then we saw them a couple of more times throughout the years. And then we did a tour with them in Australia. Like the last tour Brian did before he quit and then came back, I guess. And we were on that tour supporting them. And that was like seeing AC/DC like 9 times in a row was amazing. It really felt like a full circle. Like we were 6 and 5 years old when we heard AC/DC, and then we became a rock band that toured the world, and then we got to play with AC/DC. It felt like such a beautiful, like full circle, like you know, serendipity, like the universe making sense. I think that was the first time we talked to them. I mean, at some point I stopped trying to talk to bands I really loved, because you know.
So any band.
What's the point?
If Pelle talks to you.
Yeah, I think you're 3 out of 5 tops. But that was the first time we met them, and they were awesome. They were really nice. They were smoking cigarettes and drinking tea and talking about like their old shows opening for ABBA in Sweden and stuff. It was ABBA, right? There was some sort of cultural exchange that meant that AC/DC played a bunch of shows in like rural Sweden, and then I think ABBA got to go to Australia and do shows there.
Yeah, it was more of an exchange thing, right?
Yeah. So they talked about that, and Angus, you know, having been sober his entire rock career, remembered all that stuff. Like that's kind of uncommon, I think, in rock stars. And Brian Johnson was perfect. Like he was, you know, hanging. I think he had kind of a tough time on that tour with his voice and stuff, but he was really nice and hung out and stuff. But yeah, it was mostly just watching them from afar and going, "Let's say AC/DC." That's enough for me. That's better almost than talking to them. You can at least pick one each. I'm gonna go with Power Age. That's my favorite.
Yeah, and I can't go with anything else but For Those About to Rock. I mean, to me that's year 0 in rock for me, you know, as a kid. So it's but I mean I've discovered other AC/DC bits after my 7th birthday, and they've all, you know, there's tons of great stuff in there as well.